What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Ralph's Real Review, where today we will be going over The Fox and the Hound. I didn't say this on my last episode because I had already recorded the audio before I got the visual, but shout out to my dad for this new intro card. He designed this as we're trying to step up our production over here and grow the channel. So if you're not familiar, in this series we are watching every Disney animated and Pixar film, ranking them among 7 categories and sorting them into tiers in order to determine what is the best of the best. Starting in 2025, which is just a month away now, we will be adding all movie reviews to the channel, so if you're interested in that content, go ahead and click the subscribe button that you see on screen and help us reach our goal of 50 subs. And with that, let's get into the review. The Fox and the Hound opens with a fox and her cub. I don't know what a baby fox is called, but her baby, and they're being chased by a hunter and his dog. We're assuming that that is potentially Copper's owner. The fox leaves the baby, and we assume she is shot and killed by the hunter as the gunshots ring, and the older fox is never seen again for the rest of the movie. The baby fox is found by an old human widow thanks to the help of an owl named Big Mama, and she names the fox Todd. Todd is shown to have a nose for trouble, though, as he's not malicious, but he continuously gets into mischief, and he meets his neighbor's puppy named Copper. As children, the two are best friends, but after Copper goes away for a year and the two grow up, their friendship is put to the test as an unfortunate incident, and the world will continue to push them apart. In the animation department, I have The Fox and the Hound at 18th, which is right behind Robin Hood and ahead of Melody Time. I'm very happy with the ranking because I don't do any research on the movies until I hit box office success in these categories. I go in order. And then the historical significance section, I just kind of go based on what I see in the movie until I reach those sections of the review. And to see that my observations do have reasonings from behind the scenes stuff, it makes me feel like my eye works, if that makes sense. But anyway, this movie, I believe, is a casualty of a lot of infighting. I think for all the things this movie does well, the infighting also held it back. So if you remember from my Rescuers review, which if you haven't seen that yet, I really think you should. There's a lot of good info in there. You remember me saying that this movie, meaning The Rescuers, was the beginning of the changing of the guard. I would say that The Fox and the Hound is the complete push out. So with Wolfgang Reitherman did not direct this movie, but he did produce it, and there was a lot of bickering going on between the old and the new in terms of Disney animation, and that led to a lot of animators leaving mid-project and getting replaced, and that makes me feel like all these different artistic decisions being made kind of held the movie back. I feel like the backgrounds did take a step backwards. It felt very Bambi-esque, even though we're way later. I felt the consistency of the coloring was off, and there were some great moments. There was this stare-off between Todd and Copper in the climax where Todd was sincerely scary. We see him in a way that we haven't seen him all movie. But overall, it was just too inconsistent with the animation. I think there was really nothing spectacular, and in many ways, it felt in line with movies that were made decades, if not years prior, so low ranking in the animation department. When it comes to storytelling, I have The Fox and the Hound at 9, ahead of the Aristocats and behind 101 Dalmatians. And this ranking really sucks because while I feel this is the strongest part of this movie, I also feel that they left so much meat on the bone. This movie is a movie that I feel could be so impactful if it had a live action re-release today, because there's a theme that I feel was not fully grasped. It was touched on, but it wasn't fully embraced. And I wish it was done in greater detail, which is the idea of natural enemies being childhood friends. It kind of reminds me of that like Magneto, Professor X dynamic. But given this medium, there's so much story I feel that's there to explore, and the film's short runtime for once actually hurts it. I wish we got a longer movie that explored the theme in more depth. I wish we would have gotten more time to see this friendship really build, and then ultimately to see the factors that led to it falling apart. I wish they would have had the guts, which, spoiler alert, even though this movie's 43 years old, I wish they would have had the guts to kill off Chief. I think that would have been better for the story, and I think it would have made the movie more legendary in and of itself. With that shock value, it could have had that cultural memory like Mufasa's death had. But anyway, with that said, this movie does tell a truly sad story, and while it is not optimized in the storytelling department, I still think that it is very impactful and touching, and for that, I have to put it at 9. At characters, I have to put The Fox and the Hound at 13th. In good faith, that's about as high as I could possibly put it. The truth of this is that the movie has no iconic characters like those above it, but I do feel that Todd is severely underrated as a character, and I would argue up until this point, he is Disney's most tragic character, again, up until right now. He really feels like a mix of a Bambi and a Simba, but he doesn't really have the same fanfare as those characters. Todd loses everything. His mother is killed when he's a baby. His best friend turns on him and swears vengeance, seemingly for him, from his perspective, for no reason. And his adopted mother literally abandons him in the woods, which literally brings me to tears every time I watch this movie. No matter how many times I see it, it gets to me. I'm not sure why. I think what makes Todd so tragic, though, is that the world is doing what the world does, right? Foxes get hunted, hounds help to hunt them, and then the widow had to abandon Todd. Like, when in the context of the movie, for his safety, she had to do it. But all of these things happen to him so young, and he doesn't really understand why any of it is happening, nor does he understand that it's inevitable, right? So Todd is a character that you have to love and root for. And for him alone, I have the movie this high in the character department, but the rest of the characters play their roles well. I do think that with a longer runtime, we could get a better Copper. The way that this movie plays out, he's kind of just like, I don't know. As a kid, I felt that Copper was more understandable, but right now I'm not really feeling that as much. But I think it's more so because of a long runtime. We don't see what happens when Copper leaves for the winter with Chief and Slade on that trip. So I think we would have gotten more. We would have gotten a better Copper, but everyone else fills their roles perfectly. The lack of iconic status drops it, but the strength of its characters will give it its ranking here. At Disney Factor, I have The Fox and the Hound at 14th, right behind Lady and the Tramp, but ahead of The Three Caballeros. There's a bit of a classic Disney feel to this movie. It feels like it belongs in the categories of those older classic movies more so than a Renaissance. However, I think animation-wise, I think is where I'm feeling that way, right? Animation-wise, it feels very classic Disney. Storytelling-wise, it feels a bit more toward the modern side, but again, sitting in the middle, it doesn't really grasp either fully. I will say The Rescuers, through the animation, the animation really threw me out. But this one at least classically feels more Disney animated aesthetically, and with the cute animal characters, I would put this movie lower. But, you know, right now the middle feels about right. The Fox and the Hound, in the music category, I have it at 12th, right ahead of Robin Hood. I think this movie is not spectacular in this department. There's not much to talk about, but it's very efficient with its use of music. It did continue to push toward the modern music, as we saw with The Rescuers, as opposed to the orchestra style. And while there was no real memorable additions from this movie in terms of like classic Disney songs, there were also no unnecessary songs, and the movie didn't lend itself to music. So for its efficiency and use, but also lack of certified hits, I feel that 12 feels right. Box office success, The Fox and the Hound comes in at 13 with about $200.8 million when adjusted for inflation. That is including both the 1981 and the 1988 releases. There's not really much to report here. Wikipedia said at the time of its original opening, it was the most for an animated film, but obviously when you adjust for inflation, that record does not stick, so not much to report in this category. Finally, we have historical significance, and this is going to come in at 3, which sounds really insane when you look at the other movies on this list, but hear me out. This was Wolfgang Reitherman's last movie for Disney. The Rescuers was his last time directing, but he did produce this movie, and then that was it. 2 more of Disney's 9 Old Men were also done after this, and the new age really started here. I want to read the names of the animators who worked on this film, right? So first we have John Musker and Ron Clements, who, if you've seen any classic Disney movies, you see that they went on to produce and direct many of them, like The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Hercules, The Princess and the Frog, and now, even modern-wise, Moana. You have Brad Bird, who made The Iron Giant and The Incredibles for Pixar. You have Chris Buck, who did Tarzan and the Frozen franchise, Disney's biggest modern franchise. You have Don Bluth, who you may not know, but he did The Land Before Time, An American Tail, All Dogs Go to Heaven. You have Kelly Asbury, who went on to direct what's considered the best of the Shrek franchise and Shrek 2. You have John Lasseter, who really oversaw Pixar throughout Pixar's peak. And then you have Tim Burton, who also animated this movie, who is Tim Burton. So this movie may not have done too much for the Disney company specifically, but the amount of like impactful names who stemmed from this movie in the animation world is incredible. The movies I named, essentially, that's an entire era of animated film, and all of those names essentially getting their start, or at least close to their start, on this one film is really remarkable. So Disney has not leaned on this film too much in terms of keeping it alive. It did get a direct-to-DVD sequel, and I think this movie honestly is waiting for a modernized and fully realized live-action adaptation, kind of like what they did with Pete's Dragon. But for what it is, it's a staple of the medium of animation more than it's a staple for the company specifically. So I leave it behind Snow White and Cinderella, which really was a staple for both. That leads us to our tier list, where we will take Skippable right off, as I do love this movie. I don't want to be too biased with it, but obviously I don't think it's skippable. I do think the lack of visual aesthetics will reduce the audience retention nowadays. I think some might find the film to be boring, but I think if you're a general movie fan, there's a lot to love between the strength of the characters, the heartfelt nature of the story, and not the over-reliance on music. I do think it's another example of a better movie by Disney than a great Disney movie in its own right, but this movie does have the elements that make you feel like you were watching a Disney movie, like I said, with that classic animation style. I could see it in the Disney fans category if people wanted to push it down there, but I think right now it belongs right here in movie fans. So that's going to do it for this episode. If you haven't, please subscribe and hit the bell so you can be notified when I drop new content. In 2025, that will be a lot more frequent, so you'll definitely want to have your notifications on as I start to review all movies, not just this Disney category that I'm doing now. So be sure to share with your friends and we can continue to grow the channel. We've been stuck at 44 subs for a while. I'd really like to break 50. And then follow me on TikTok at Ralph's Rapid Reviews, where we are approaching 200 followers. Over there, I give you guys the bite-sized version of these reviews. They're less than a minute. And then you can follow me on Instagram at Ralph's Review, where I post to let y'all know what I'm up to. But that's it for today's episode, guys. Let me know in the comments what you think about The Fox and the Hound. I feel many will think I'm too high on it, but you guys definitely let me know below. And thanks for watching, guys.